Hi everyone, I'm Vaishnavi Ladda. I'm currently in my second year studying animation and film design at the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, and I will be your host for the day. For those of you all who are new to Baatein, Baatein, which translates to a conversation, is the National Institute of Design's unique interactive platform to learn and share. And today we have with us Rohan Chakravarty. Welcome to Baatein, Rohan.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. I started my career with animation, and I always wanted to be, an NID student back then. This was 10 years back. So this is a very special opportunity. It feels like a wildcard entry into the institute. So thank you for making this happen.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to have you. All right. So before we dive in, I'll just briefly introduce Rohan. Notorious for rolling up into a ball like a pangolin to avoid answering the phone or meeting people, Rohan is a cartoonist, illustrator, and the creator of Green Humour, hailing from Nagpur, the tiger capital of the world. Green Humour is a series of cartoons, comics, and illustrations on wild animals, wildlife and nature conservation, environment, sustainability, and all things green. Green Humour is possibly the largest collection of cartoons on wildlife and the environment on the web. Cartoons from Green Humour have appeared in Sanctuary Asia, National Geographic Traveller, and Tinkle Digest, among others. They also periodically appear in multiple publications, including the Hindu Sunday magazine, Go Comics, and Midday. Illustrations from Green Humour have also been used for several conservation campaigns and publications by organizations such as the Worldwide Fund for Nature and the Wildlife Trust of India, to name a few. Welcome once again to Baatein, Rohan. Let's begin the session.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Krishna.
So to start with, can you give us an insight into your journey to Green Humour and how you established this brand?
I wouldn't call it a brand. It's just a series of cartoons and illustrations that deal with nature, wildlife, ecology, all things green, basically. And that's something I always had a dormant interest until it was triggered into action after I saw my first tigress in the wild. This was way back in 2005. I was studying to be a dentist. Midway, I figured out it wasn't for me. After finishing my degree, I started training for a career in animation. I made animated advertisements for a film studio in Bangalore for 3 years, and only after that did I take the plunge into full-time cartooning. So it's been a very long and a very meandering journey, and like I said, at one point I was also considering enrolling into NID. I don't know whether for good or for bad it never happened, but yeah, I can't complain. I'm really enjoying the stage of my career I'm in right now, and it's been an exciting year in terms of work.
That's great to know. It's quite interesting that you moved from dentistry to cartooning. That's quite a different jump.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's been a very meandering journey, and I think it's the story of a lot of people like me from small towns who, in my city, art is still not looked at as a viable career option. So I'm sure a lot of us go through the kind of journey I have.
Yeah, right. So if you had to define being a cartoonist as a profession, how would you define it? Like, what does a cartoonist mean to you?
I'll borrow a quote from Raima Suprani, who's a Venezuelan cartoonist in exile right now. She's in the US, and she says that cartoons are the barometer of freedom, and that really resonates with me. I think the job of cartoons is to reflect a country's mood on a given day, and I think that's what cartoons do quite beautifully. And that's what I try to do within the sphere of the environment and ecology and green matters.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, there are so many cartoonists right now, especially as the shift from print to digital has happened. Online, you can see so many people. So, if you had to differentiate between an amateur cartoonist and a professional, would there be, how would you differentiate the two?
I still don't know which bracket I fall into. I still consider myself an amateur in so many ways. But yeah, I've been a cartoonist in the print for well over 7-8 years now. So I think it's a very exciting time to be a cartoonist because the transition is happening at a breakneck speed, and the print is dying a very slow but a definite death. And for someone like me who has always had his idols in the print media, it is very difficult to adapt to the web suddenly, because I think guys from artists from my generation are yet to figure out how to adapt their work online. And frankly, it is something that I am struggling with. I really enjoy being in the print. I really enjoy being read in the print, and the fact that my columns, especially with the Hindu, which is India's second most read newspaper, reaches a lot, a many number of people who probably don't use a platform like Instagram. But at the same time, expanding on the web is also something that is inevitable given the way information is consumed today. So, and a lot of young artists I know are doing it brilliantly. They're using platforms like Patreon and many of these individual patronage models to fund their work, and it is working out wonderfully for them. And I think the sooner people like me, obsolete people like me, figure that out, the better it is for our art as well. But yeah, having said that, it's a very interesting time to try and exploit the newer avenues that are available to you. As you might already know about art expanding into the crypto sphere and as non-fungible tokens, and that's something frankly I have no understanding of, and I think the sooner I understand, the better it is for my series as well.
Right, that's quite insightful. So I had this question around, like, you moved from, say, you were becoming a dentist, and then you came into cartooning. And even in cartooning, you have this specific interest of wildlife conservation and some topics relating around politics, right? So where did this personal mission of like creating a visual identity for wildlife conservation like root from?
Again, wildlife was a dormant interest which triggered into action after I started, knowing more about nature. And after that, I felt a need to have some kind of a muse, a constant muse. I have dabbled as a cartoonist considerably. I've tried politics, I've tried making cartoons on Bollywood and social issues, but I never quite found my feet. And it was only after I started drawing about wildlife that I could sense that my work is taking a certain direction. And that over time, I also realized that not much creative communication was happening in terms of putting out information about conservation, and that's where people like me needed to step in. Not just cartoons, but also maybe animation. There are a lot of interesting explainer videos that you can find on about ecology, and also matters pertaining to the intersection between environment and government, and how politics comes into play with conservation. So these are issues that laymen do not actively engage with, and these are issues that need to be put out in interesting ways to catch people's attention. And that was something I wanted to try to do with cartoons. And so over time, it became a sort of a symbiotic association between me and my muse, which is wildlife. And yeah, I think it has developed in ways that I would call very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a pleasure to just read comics and get to know about so much just through one like illustration. So talking about research methodologies and all this scientific jargon that you're representing through your art, could you tell us a little bit about what sort of research method do you follow, like before reaching the end product?
It's very random, frankly. It depends on what kind of work it is for. So, for example, a comic strip could result from actually having seen a species out in the open on a nature trail or a bird walk, and then getting fascinated by it and finding out more about it, and eventually wanting to draw something around it. If it's a project that I am commissioned for, say, I do a lot of posters and infographics and maps, especially for forest departments and organizations that are involved in conservation. So for those maps, a field visit is almost always mandatory, and that's something I take up on principle, because I think there is no substitute for first-hand information gathering, and that's how a composite project results. From field visits, from taking pictures of things, from actually gathering data yourself, what kind of birds, what kind of animals are found in the given area, what kind of communities reside there, and how they interact with the natural resources available to them, and how they are involved in the conservation of a given place, and how their relationship with the authorities are. So there's a lot of information to figure out first, then collate and represent it as illustrated material. So it's a lot of homework, it's a lot of field work, And of course, taking you through some of my recent projects, like the book I've recently come out with, Natural Study. It's actually, reading very boring scientific papers and then figuring out how to tell them, how to retell them as detective stories. So it's really a very random process, and it varies from project to project.
Right. So, have you ever, like you said, you read research papers and then you had to, if there was some sort of a collaboration, you had to talk to them or
Yeah.
field visits as such. So, have you ever had the opportunity to collaborate with scientists as well?
Oh, absolutely. I do a lot of work with scientists. In fact, most of my commission projects have been in conjunction with scientists or teams of scientists that have worked on a given animal that the project speaks about, or a given area that the project speaks about. This year, particularly, I've done a lot of projects with the Save Our Seas Foundation, which is based in South Africa, and I've done illustrated compilations of habitats of different places where their science units work. One of them, my most recent illustration was that of Antarctica. They have a field station in the Antarctic Peninsula where I got to interact with scientists who are actually working on conserving penguins and a lot of other wildlife in Antarctica, and draw a composite habitat illustration of the place. So yeah, a lot of my work happens in conjunction with scientists.
Okay. So, how was your experience working with like these scientists, collaborating with them, understanding their research? Because, of course, like you said, it's quite heavy, and converting it into simpler forms might be a task, right? So,
Yeah, I think
how did you even approach these scientists?
frankly, I find reading science papers really boring. So if something
Okay.
is translated into, say, an interesting conversation for me, I get involved in that project. I get invested in that project. So, for example, an illustration required me to read a paper about orcas and how they pass on their language and their dialect to their future generations, to their progeny. And I understood nothing out of reading that paper. Then there was this scientist called Janie Ray, who's one of the leading researchers of killer whales in the world, and she took me through that entire paper on a video call, and that's how my interest also peaked, and that's how I think it was only because of that conversation that I could do justice to that particular illustration. So it's I've always said that I've always described myself as a person with very low IQ, which is why drawing also becomes something that helps me retain and learn new things. And it's an interesting association with the kind of work I do, because it if it's helping somebody like me retain and learn new things, I hope it is also helping my audience or my readership.
Right. So you just talked about a lot of maps that you've worked on and that you have to do a lot of field research. So there are so many incredible maps that you've already made. But there was this one particular map,
Thank you.
the wildlife map of Bhutan, if I'm not wrong, which had
Yeah.
not just information about wildlife, but also monuments and a lot of other things. So could you just
That's
take
right.
us through the process as to how you make these maps and illustrations? What all goes in?
Sure. So I'll give you the example of Bhutan itself. This was for WWF in Bhutan, and it was a project I myself pitched to the team because I wanted to visit Bhutan and understand the country, especially in terms of its ecology. So I pitched the project to WWF Bhutan, and immediately they showed interest. Within a month's time, I was in Bhutan, and I had the pleasure of spending a week there and trekking through some very interesting places, very interesting forests. And during my field visit, I came to know a lot of things about Bhutan and the way the country is governed. It has a gross happiness index. It has a constitutional clause to maintain over 70% of its area under forest cover, which is phenomenal for a country that size. Of course, there are many political nitty-gritties that around this clause, but the gist is that conservation is at the core of being Bhutanese, and that was something I wanted to reflect in the map as well. And so a lot of their culture, a lot of their history, architecture, mythology is all very intertwined with nature. And there is a lot of folklore that revolves around a lot of animals. Even the national animal, the takin, is the source of a lot of mythological stories and folklore. So these are things that I wanted to reflect in the map as well. And WWF also had the vision to make this illustration not exclusive to their own organization, but also a downloadable and usable format across the country. So they had kept it open for every Bhutanese citizen to download and use wherever they like. And eventually, the then Prime Minister of Bhutan, Tshering Tobgay, had actually printed and inaugurated the map on the occasion of the prince's birthday. So it was a project that got a lot of traction in a country like Bhutan, which meant a lot for somebody like me, because it was one of the projects that I myself had pitched to an organization, and to have borne fruit like that meant a lot to me. So this kind of research, this kind of interaction and first-hand information gathering, I think goes a long way in creating an illustration.
Right, that's very interesting, and I mean that map is just phenomenal. Like, I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So another thing I was wondering was, like, have you ever felt the need to consciously maintain a balance between humor and science? Like, has one of them overshadowed the other at any point?
Yeah, I'm more. I think I incline more towards the humor part of my work rather than science, but I have to work hard to maintain, to not take certain liberties. Like, I have to ensure that at least the trivia or the facts I'm presenting are not distorted, are always verified, and are backed with some kind of information that is published in a verifiable source. So that is one that I think that's a responsibility that somebody like me must take up. But having said that, I do push my limits whenever I can. A good example is a lot of biology revolving around Indian wildlife has actually been converted into I'd say semi-fiction, because it is through the eyes of a mongoose. Whatever he is observing actually does happen in nature, but it is through the life and the eyes of a fictional mongoose. So a lot of my work falls into this category, which cannot really be defined as non-fiction or fiction. It falls somewhere midway, and it's an interesting border to take your work on.
Right. So talking about simplification, so what's your approach to convey all this scientific jargon in a simplified way to, like, ensure that there's clear communication to the audience?
Like I said, I always look at cartooning as something that helps me retain and understand what I'm trying to present to my audience. So if it is palatable to me and if it makes me smile, it goes through the editing table, where the editor is me. Of course, I have editors above me for my columns and for my books, but the first stage of editing is through me, and my criteria is that I should be able to retain and understand what I'm presenting.
Right.
So yeah, it's really as simple as that.
Okay. So how do you ensure that your work, I mean, with times changing, so many cartoonists coming up, and being a topic which is very sensitive to detail, like wildlife, how do you make sure that your work remains contemporaneous and like it stays appealing to the younger masses as well?
I don't think I'm doing a good job at it, frankly. I think I'm a little obsolete. I don't know what hashtag FOMO means. I don't know what. I'm so new to Instagram. It's been 4 years, and I still have a lot of trouble figuring out. This Instagram Live, for example. I had to go through so many stages to make this work. And I still don't know what a boomerang is. There's so much to figure out, really, and it's quite intimidating for me. But I'm a grumpy old man who can't get on with the times. But I'm trying. I hope that whatever I come up with has been relatable for young people like you, and young artists like you. I'll keep at it for as long as I think I am invested enough to find out more about things like FOMOs and boomerangs.
Right. So, as a cartoonist, could you talk a little bit about any challenges or setbacks that you might have faced?
Oh, so many. I think the first one was to get my publishers to take me seriously, get my readers to take me seriously. Because when I started out, I don't think this was a topic that it was hard for me to find a serious readership. Earlier, it was only scientists and people who worked with ecology who read my work. But after I made some headway with newspapers, it was then that I started to amass a readership that was from diverse backgrounds and various walks of life. Then an expansion into social media happened because of a platform like Instagram, and there was a lot more engagement with my content. I hate to call it content, but that's how the world knows it today. With my series, for the lack of a better word, and yeah, so one thing has led to another, and I think it's been an interesting journey because I've uh, I've experienced the effectiveness of different platforms, and when they all come together, it does result in a lot of interest and in a lot of engagement with your work.
Right. So, like you said, that you have moved from print media or like print towards like digital quite recently. So, have you experienced any sort of trolling or like hatred or like hate comments? If yes, like how do you deal with that on something
Yeah,
which is based on facts?
Yeah, I think this is something I experience day in and day out. In the print, I would say there is a readership that is actually, genuinely interested in your work. So the kind of feedback I receive from readers from in the print is tends to be more often than not very productive, and very constructive. And the kind of feedback I receive online is a lot of trolling, is a lot of negative, engagement with my content. But of course, there are readers who do take the trouble of deciphering and understanding my comics and then engaging with it. So it's a mixed bag, but of course trolling happens only online. It does not result from the print usually, and it is something that you have to figure out a way to deal with as an artist today in today's times. I think it's much worse for women who draw about politics, especially, and I can't even imagine what they go through. But for somebody like me, it's relatively easier to develop a thick skin and just move on, because I do not get personal comments. I do not get personal attacks, which probably a lot of women artists I know face. So yeah.
That's good to know, and also not. I mean,
Yeah.
so while depicting sensitive themes of any sorts, how do you make sure that you stay wary of your own prejudices to not reflect what your opinions are?
Well, this is a very interesting question because I have gone through these situations a lot of times. I remember there was a cartoon I drew about pronouns recently, and this wasn't something I myself understood very well. So I actually consulted a cousin of mine who happens to be happens to have a master's in gender studies, and she took me through what is an appropriate way of representation, what is not. And I came to know that a famous comedian had received a lot of flack for saying something inappropriate about pronouns recently. I do not follow stand-up comedy much, so I don't actively keep up with these things. But yeah, consultation with experts in whatever sphere you're tackling always helps. And I think having a low IQ works to my advantage because consultation often becomes imperative by not knowing about a lot of things. So I think that helps me learn more new things as well, and also keeps me going.
Okay. So yeah, I was just asking that with like slowdown in human activity during the pandemic especially,
Yeah.
and you working around something like wildlife, has there been
Right.
any sort of trend, or how has this anthropos that they call, how has that affected your work? Or have you seen something change, like in terms of news or the way that you're presenting your work during the pandemic?
Well, a lot of content has started to be consumed digitally, and I think that's the pandemic has definitely brought about the death of the print, and this is something that is affecting people like me who depend on the print media for taking their careers forward. So this is a moment of realization for artists from my generation that you cannot subsist entirely on the print media. I've also lost a lot of projects that depended on travel. A lot of the maps and the work I do with forest departments depends on travel, and I could not take up a lot of projects during the lockdowns. So I did end up losing a lot of work, but then It's also taught me that you need to actively tap into multiple avenues and keep them going. So, for example, while I could not take up travel-related assignments, it was the sale of merchandise that kept me going. And this is, unfortunately, these are things that artists who even speak about things like sustainability and conservation need to depend on, because this is the reality of art. You have to. As an artist, especially in India, you have to depend on something like merchandise to keep you going when times are tough, when there's a lockdown and you can't take up meaningful work. So it has taught me to be practical, be pragmatic, and keep tapping into as many avenues that are available to you and that you think can do justice to your work.
Right. But also in particular, like because the human activity reduced quite a bit because of the pandemic and the lockdown and everything,
Right.
there were quite a few news regarding birds migrating, or there is like dolphins being spotted in the ocean and things like that. So in particular to wildlife, was there anything was there like a change in the kind of content again that you created just during this COVID time?
Actually, most of the news items that revolved around wildlife being spotted in the vicinity of a city, birds migrating to a certain place. Okay. All of this was actually always happening. It was just because people had nothing else to do that they started to notice, these kind of developments, and news started making the rounds. But if you actually look at the science behind it, all of this has always been happening, and we have been too busy to pay attention. Speaking about how it has affected my work, yes, naturalist study again is the result of a lockdown, and it was the whole idea came about after I was locked in and I could not go birding to an exotic location or chase exotic species, and I was locked in and I was forced to explore my own backyard, and that's when I started to take active interest in the lives of insects, the lives of lizards, spiders, things that I hadn't paid attention to before. And then it struck me how little I know about my own vicinity, about my own surroundings. And that's something I really needed to explore. And, a project is the best excuse for me to learn more about new things. And that's how, naturalist study happened. I became a detective in my own backyard, which ultimately translated to the detective mongoose exploring the forest around him.
It's quite interesting. So, have you ever had the chance to witness your work creating an impact in society?
Thankfully, yes. There have been quite a few occasions. A lot of the posters that come out with forest departments, these are a part of souvenir shops, nature interpretation centers in national parks, and they are read by both tourists and locals alike. And in a lot of events like the Hornbill Festival that happens in Arunachal, I have had the chance to actually interact with communities that have read my work and attended my workshops, and the kind of impact that it has on them. For example, my map of Bhutan Tiger Reserve was being discussed at this event, and there were kids who were actually looking out for their homes on the map, the areas where they live in, and what kind of wildlife is found there. So I think that builds a sense of pride and ownership of that place in that community, and yeah, I think it's been a very positive engagement by and large. There have been instances where people have written to me that they've given up civet coffee, or they've given up the idea of exotic pets, and even given up collecting seashells after reading my work. And that means a lot, because to even create a small impact actually means that your work has saved the life of one wild animal, and that's a significant small step.
Absolutely. You must feel very proud sometimes. I mean, just the fact that somebody is not.
Yeah, I would really like to have more such tangible impacts of my work in future.
Definitely,
that's what I'm
yeah. So, since these cartoons that you make, they're highly educational. They're telling us a lot about a lot of things. So, are there any plans to make these cartoons and illustrations in regional languages as well?
Oh yeah, it's already on. I published with Chakmak, which is a Hindi magazine that comes out of Bhopal. So every
Okay.
month, one of my comics is translated to Hindi and published in the magazine. A lot of my work with the forest departments and even in local NGOs is translated into regional languages. One of the books I did called Making Friends with Snakes is available in 14 languages across India, and yeah,
Oh,
there will be
wow.
more such endeavors in future.
That's amazing. So, one big question, like, so what's the next big thing coming up for Green Humor? Are there any plans or what's coming up?
I really wish I could sound heroic and give you describe a lot of grand projects to you, but that's not the case. I think I've worked sufficiently hard this year, and I think I need a break next year, and that's what I'll be doing. I need to replenish my gray matter because I depend a lot on reading, on watching films, on going out for my own explorations to come up with new stuff, and I think. I need to slow down at this juncture and replenish whatever's in my brain. So I think next year is going to be slow for me. Sorry, that
Like,
was a real bummer to your question, but
no, no,
that's
no,
me
not
being
at
honest.
all. Not at
Yeah,
all. So I had a question specific to censorship. So has it ever
yeah.
happened that censorship served as a barrier in your work?
Yeah, of course. Every cartoonist, every person who deals with humor or anything controversial or political today has to try and figure out how to bypass or circumvent this obstacle that is censorship. And I think it's also the mark of say an intelligent artist to find a creative way around it, and that's something I mean it is an obstacle but it's also an exciting challenge that you live in a country that actively tries to censor your work and tries to censor the ways in which you present the point of your work. So and you're from NID, so you will relate with the fact that illustration is nothing but a visual way of solving problems. So if that problem is censorship, it is up to us to also try and figure out a creative way to circumvent that barrier. And it becomes an interesting tug of war between artists and the authorities. Of course, I wish it wasn't the case, but these are the realities of today.
Right. So we'll just take the questions. We have some questions from the audience. We'll
Sure.
just take those up for now. Yeah. One second. Yeah. So this question is by Nitya. She's asking, what would be your advice for someone who wants to get into this area of working around or for nature?
Uh, does she mean as an artist or generally?
Yeah, I think as an artist. I'll just switch on
Well,
the comments. Yeah.
I'm really the wrongest person to be giving advice. I've had so many career mishaps, but let's see. I think you need to actively daydream, and you need to let your mind wander, and you need to be curious. I think that's the simplest advice I can give you.
I hope that answers your question, Nitya.
I know it does not.
Um, One second. So, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. Nishoi asks, hi, amazing work. Just wanted to know the software or supplies that you started with.
Oh, I still use Adobe Photoshop and a very simple drawing tablet, Intuos Draw. I started with that and I still use it.
Okay. The next question is, one second. Oh, this is not a question, but Sharif Kamar says, my 4-year-old loves me reading and explaining your cartoons. Really good work.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Your 4-year-old has good taste in cartoons. No, I'm kidding.
This is a similar question. What visual media apps do you use? I think we've already answered that.
Yeah, I've answered that.
Yeah. Mm, yeah, all right. That's about it for the questions. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to put it in the question box. We'll take them up as they come. So another question I had was, why did you move? Like you said that you moved from animation to cartoon making. So
Yeah.
what was the reason of this change? How did you find your niche?
I think I'm giving away a lot of my weaknesses by means of answering your questions, but I think I have to be honest here, so I'll tell you this. I'm a bad team player. I cannot function in teams very well, and I think I work a lot better individually. And I think that is something that deterred me from filmmaking and animation because it needs you to work with large teams. And quite often I ended up not seeing eye to eye with my directors, my editors, etc. And that led me, that's one reason. The other reason is that I also believe a lot more in the power of a static medium rather than something that is dynamic, something that flows. I think a static medium like a cartoon or a panel cartoon allows my readers to form their own opinions. It encourages them to form their own opinions rather than feeding them with an opinion, which I think video or animation or film tends to do. And I think that's also why I prefer being an artist in a static medium rather than a dynamic one.
All right. We have a question from messworks.co. How did you establish the distinct illustration style that you have?
I must first thank Messworks for doing the caricature of me. It was really cool. Thanks so much for that, and it means a lot that an NID student took up the task of drawing me. Now, distinct illustration style isn't something that happens overnight. It just develops over a very long time, and it actually, if I can be honest again, it actually began by me copying a lot of the artists I admired, and eventually realizing that copying is not really going to take me anywhere. So it was adapting some features that I found interesting in the work of various artists, and then trying to figure out how best it works for me. And I think the process of adaptation still continues. So even speaking about my recent book, Natural Study, the whole idea was actually it actually came by after reading Slylock Fox. Slylock Fox is by Bob Weber. It's a cartoon series about a detective fox, and that's how the inception of Natural Study happened. And it has taken its own form and its own shape as an individual story. But the genesis has been somebody else's work as an influence or or a source of inspiration. So I think developing a distinct style isn't something that happens overnight. It takes months, even years to form. But you, as an artist, you realize when it has started to happen.
Right. I hope that answered you. All right, we have one more question. It's by Real Anu Kulkarni. Do you plan more books soon? Will we have Ruddy 2.0?
I don't think I have any such plans, such immediate plans right now. Of course, I might do books in future that on stories that interest me, but I can guarantee this is not going to happen next year.
All right. Okay. So we'll take up the questions as they come. For now, I have another question. So, what is your process of developing humor? Like, again, with changing times, the kind of humor that goes out, that also changes. And like, have you always been a humorous person? Like, how do you develop that skill?
Never. My friends will tell you I'm the grumpiest person they know, and humor is not something that comes naturally to me in day-to-day life. I think I have some kind of an alter ego that is able to draw these cartoons for me, and I'm quite thankful that that's the case. And I don't think humor is something that you need to work very hard on. I mean, if it comes to you, it comes to you, and I mean, you need to have some kind of a flair for it, because it's not something that is possible to learn. Drawing, of course, is possible to learn for anybody. Even creating cartoons is possible for everybody to learn. But I think you need to have some kind of natural flair for humor, and only then does it translate into cartoons. But having said that, it is also a medium that needs to evolve with time, that needs to keep moving on with times. And I think reading helps a lot. Exposure to pop culture helps a lot. I'm a person who's crazy about cinema. I keep exploring cinema from all around the world. I do not watch web series, but I still watch a lot of cinema. And the fact that a lot of cinema from around the world is so accessible today, actually helps me and even keeps me going in terms of material that could possibly influence future work or inspire something new.
Right. But again, very, very interesting to know. I mean, I wouldn't have considered you not to be a humorous person. I mean, after looking at your comics. Okay. Yeah, we have another question. This is by Darshit Gohel. What is your take on politicizing cartoon or animation?
What is my take on politicizing? I don't think there is any active politicization of art. If you're an artist, it's your job to politicize, to reflect politics in the medium. If you're not doing that, I wouldn't call you a cartoonist, I would call you a greeting card designer, So it's really as simple as that.
Okay, I hope that answered you, Darshit. We have one more question by Sagar. No, sorry. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. Did the Amul hoardings, taking cues, help you develop a style? What's your inspiration? So I think, what's your sources of inspiration while you work?
I haven't particularly been inspired by Amul hoardings, although I love some of their advertisements. I have read the book by Raul D'Acuna about how Amul hoardings did come into being, and it's quite an interesting process about the way they've built a brand out of humorous visual art. But yeah, I think my sources of inspiration are very different. A lot of my work and humor are inspired by the material I have read and grown up watching. Some of the more prominent names among those are Gary Larson, the Far Side series, Bill Watterson of Calvin and Hobbes, and Gendy Tartakovsky, whose Dexter's Lab and Samurai Jack are two of my most favorite animation shows.
All right. Thanks, Rohan. Another question I had was like, is there any word of advice that you'd like to give to the upcoming cartoonists or illustrators? Anything that you might have wanted to know when you started?
I actually need advice from your generation because I'm really struggling to expand into the web and adapt my work into new online platforms. So I'm the one who needs advice right now, frankly.
Okay. So talking about internet and expanding the work, if I'm not wrong, when Go Comics picked up Green Humour for syndication, that was the only cartoon from India to be picked up by Go Comics, right? So how is that feeling?
To be picked up by an international syndicate,
I think.
If I'm not wrong, it's still the only Indian series, but I may be wrong. I haven't checked this in a while. So yeah, it was an exciting moment in my career because it was the kind of push I needed to have the kind of confidence in Green Humour to give up my day job, which is not something I used to be an animator, and by that time, it had starting to get very mundane. I was only getting corporate IT assignments as an animator, and I wasn't enjoying those. So Go Comics happened at a time when I needed a push to feel confident enough to take the plunge, and thankfully, a lot of newspaper editors started taking my series seriously. A lot of readers started taking my series seriously after that. So it was a cusp, an interesting cusp, and a very important cusp in my career.
Right. Yeah. So one more question I had was, like we talked about humor and developing that skill of humor. So of course there's creative block with artists all the time, but is there something called a humor block, or is there something specific that happens with cartoonists? Like now what?
It happens every day.
How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the creative block?
So when I started out, and it happens every day, okay, every single day of my life. And when I started out, I thought that this is going to end my life. This is going to be the end of my career once and for all. And over time, I figured out that this is not really a disease. It is a sign that you need to step back. You need to listen to some music. You need to go cook something nice. You need to go take a walk with your dogs. You need to go watch a bird singing about. And it's just a sign for you to step back, breathe, pause, and let life around you, let the world around you replenish what's in your head. So I think it's just a matter of getting used to blocks and making friends with them. I'm still struggling, frankly. I sound a lot wiser than I actually am, but I'll get there.
Talking about dog, I hope Murphy is fine. I mean, after that incident.
Oh no, I was referring to Murphy's Law. My pets are called Shrishti and Sakshi.
Oh,
They
okay,
chewed up
okay.
the internet
Oh, I'm
wire.
so
But
sorry.
yeah, everything's in control now. Thanks for asking.
Okay, great. I had one last question. So, like, your journey has been from panels, and now you're making books as well. Like, it's been some time. So, was that jump difficult for you, or how did you move from making panels to books? And how was that journey?
No, I still do panel cartoons. I still do comic strips, and I
Yeah.
actually enjoy experimenting with different formats a lot because I see a lot of cartoonists sticking to this a same singular format, and it after a time it gets very repetitive. So I think that's
Hmm.
one way for me to avoid getting into that trap has been to experiment with various formats, and thankfully. The different columns that I have, the different ongoing columns. One is Sunday Midday, one is the Hindu. I publish with Round Glass Sustain, which is an online wildlife magazine. They all have different lengths and different formats for me to work with, and that keeps the process of rotating things and playing around with things
Yeah.
very active and very playful for me. So again, it's helped my work a lot. The space I have with Go Comics allows one for a single panel. I also
Okay.
work with Cartoon Stock. Cartoon Stock tends to go for single panel cartoons. So it's a very exciting challenge for me to figure out what kind of scripts would work on a single panel and what kind of how I can lend in certain bits of information to present as 4 panel or a Sunday comic strip. So it's been a sort of an experiment that has also kept my series going.
Right. Okay. So I had actually one more question. So we talked about humor
Yeah.
in science. So there must have also been incidences when you might have to depict a serious topic, but then again, it's a
Yeah.
cartoon. So to depict it with humor. So have you ever had to compromise in that sense to depict a serious topic, but using the humor that Green Humor stands for?
There are, I wouldn't call it a compromise, but a process of adaptation, and I think there are pieces where I have had to be a lot more sensitive than I actually am. And, say things like depiction of tribal views on conservation. These are things that I, don't have much of an understanding of. And I think a tribal community would understand what they are conserving far better than an urban one. So in depicting these kind of scenarios and situations, you as an artist who hails from a more urban background need to be sensitive about what you're presenting, and you can't just fool around with humor frivolously. It being a cartoonist is also a responsibility. So I do take that responsibility as seriously as I can, and not be frivolous about issues that tend to be serious and sensitive. And yeah, I frankly don't look at it as a compromise on humor. I would say it is adapting as an artist and uh,
Right.
somebody who solves problems visually.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that answer. It was something I was wondering for quite some time. Like to manage such topics of politics and cartoon must be quite a challenge. All right, I think we have come to the end of the session. It was great having you on Baatein. Thank you so much, Rohan, for coming. And I had a great
Same here,
time
boss.
having this conversation with you. All the best
Thanks. I
for
really
all
enjoyed your
that's to
questions, and
come to Green Humour.
no, thanks so much for taking the trouble to ask insightful questions and giving me also in the process of answering your questions, understanding my own work better. And of course, like I said in the beginning, thank you for facilitating this backdoor entry into NID Ahmedabad.
No, no, it was a pleasure to have you, Rohan.
Thank
All
you.
right then, all the best for everything that's coming.
Thanks so much to you
We'll
too.
hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good day.
All right, bye. Have a good day.